Hey everybody, Logan Albright here, back with another book review for your viewing pleasure. You know you love it. Today I want to talk about Giles Goat Boy, or the Revised New Syllabus by John Barth. This is a weird book. I read about it while I was trying to find a list of unusual, interesting, quirky, funny books, and I'm hoping to find a new author that I could really sink my teeth into. I think Anthony Burgess, who wrote A Clockwork Orange, listed this on one of his as one of his favorite books of the 20th century. It was written in 1966. And it is ostensibly about a boy who was raised by goats, leaving his home in the goat pen and going to college where he saves the world. It's about the Cold War, it's about religion, it's about life in general. It was written in 1966, so it was the height of those events. And it is a 700-page, very elaborate allegory about the Cold War and about religion and about other things. Essentially what John Barth does in this book is he allegorizes the entire universe in academia terms. So the world is referred to as the campus, the Western Hemisphere is the West Campus, the Eastern Hemisphere is the East Campus. They are involved in what is ostensibly the Cold War, but they call it the Quiet Riot. They refer to World War II as the Second Campus Riot. They talk about, dying as like matriculating. They talk about the devil being the dean of flunks. Or the founder being God, things like that. Everything is done in academic terms, and everything is, I guess in the universe of this novel, nothing exists outside of the university and the university setting. Essentially what happens is George Giles, or he calls himself by a bunch of different names, but he eventually goes by George Giles, was raised by goats. He leaves the goat pen, he goes to the university, and he has to save the world from this giant supercomputer that was constructed to help in the Quiet Riot. I don't know if that's where the band got their name, by the way. That would be interesting to find out. But the computer was built to help with the Quiet Riot, but he's in danger of destroying the whole world. Clearly there's an analogy with the atom bomb here. And Giles thinks of himself as sort of a messianic figure who has to go and save the world. It's weird. It's a weird book. And I enjoyed it for about the first 100 pages, and I thought it was clever. I thought it was a little bit funny, and then I kind of got sick of it. And I think the problem is that there's a limit to allegory and how interesting it can be, at least to me. It's a difficult book to read because the dialogue is very stilted, and everything is written in code, essentially. Everything stands for something else. Like I said, all these university terms, they all stand for something else, so you have to decode it as you're reading it. And I find that distracts from the plot, and you spend all your time trying to figure out what the author is talking about, what he really means when he says a certain word, when he could just use the word that he really means. It doesn't really add anything. It's clever, but it's not enjoyable. Essentially, allegory is when you're using one story that's about one thing to stand in place for a broader story or a broader theme and make a larger point by using this smaller story as an illustration. And I think it can work very well when it's done correctly, but in order for it to work, the surface level story has to stand on its own merits and has to be enjoyable even if you don't get the deeper meaning. For example, I'm a big fan of Nathaniel Hawthorne. His novel, The Scarlet Letter, is very famous for being an allegorical novel. It's about this woman who lives in this Puritan community, and because she is caught committing adultery, she is forced to wear this red letter A on her clothing. Everyone knows that she is a sinful woman and they can judge her accordingly. Now, that's a great surface level story, works perfectly well on its own. Of course, the A is an allegory. It stands for something broader. It's a metaphor. It stands for the kind of mark of shame that you have to wear in these kind of overly judgmental small Puritan communities when you've done something sinful. It's used to represent the hypocrisy of the populace who judge Hester Prynne for wearing the A very harshly, but they all have their own secrets that are not so visible to the naked eye, and they get away with their own sins. So that's an allegory where I think it really works because you can read it just as a surface level story and enjoy it. You don't have to get the deeper meaning. If you do get the deeper meaning, it gives a greater richness to the story, to the text. It makes you enjoy it more. Another example might be something like The Picture of Dorian Gray by Oscar Wilde, in which the conceit is that the protagonist has a painting made of him which will age instead of him aging. It will bear the marks of his misdeeds. It will become more grotesque and more ugly as he does more evil and bad things. And it works great as like a little science fiction horror story. Fantastic. Of course, the painting is representing something deeper, is representing your internal moral decay and what happens to you when you do bad things that are represented in visual form by this painting. So those are good examples of allegory that work because you can enjoy it on two different levels. Giles Goat Boy doesn't really work that way because if you just try to read it as a surface level story, you'll be very confused. You won't have any idea what's going on. You have to know about the Cold War. You have to know about the Second World War. There's a lot about religion, a lot of religious allegory in there that you have to kind of get. And you have to decode all this language that he's using in this academia terminology in order to really understand the story. And I found that exhausting after a while, especially after 700 pages. So I really felt like it was sort of a shallow story. The characters were not that interesting. The characters were not morally compelling. I didn't care about them. I didn't care what happened to them. The whole book is focused on the cleverness of the device of the allegory rather than telling a compelling story, rather than having compelling characters. There's not really any kind of dramatic arc. The characters are never really in peril. You're never really worried about what's going to happen to them. It ends pretty much as you would expect it to end from the beginning. There's nothing surprising or twisting in it. So I guess what I'm saying is that John Barth is a very clever and capable writer, and it's interesting to see what he's trying to do here, and he clearly has talent, but I just think it was kind of squandered on this one idea instead of actually stripping back some of the cleverness and trying just to tell a story about people. I think it would be much better served by that. So I was a little bit disappointed, and I really did struggle to finish the 700 pages of Giles Goat Boy. I was completely uninterested by the end and didn't care what happened and just wanted to finish it. So that's my review of Giles Goat Boy by John Barth. It's a very kind of postmodern 20th century sort of book. If you're into that sort of thing, if you're into very clever and elaborately worked out allegory, you might enjoy it. I personally found it a little hollow and wanting, and I don't intend to return to the author's other books anytime soon. That's been my review. I've been Logan Albright. I hope you've enjoyed it. And if you haven't already, be sure to check out a copy of my new book, Our Servants, Our Masters, available now on Kindle and paperback on Amazon.com. Link in the description. Thanks so much for watching. Be sure to like and subscribe, and I'll catch you next time.